Okay, welcome everyone to the February 11th special call meeting for Union County Public Schools Board of Education. We'll begin with approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So I just want to thank the board and staff for doing this presentation tonight for an academic update on all of the reports and numbers that staff and the superintendent has been able to gather from performance for the fall semester. And we have a presentation ready, so I'll just turn it over to Dr. Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see you, and thank you for your flexibility and for joining us tonight. We want to give the board a quick high-level update this evening on kind of a mid-year, end of first semester report on academic performance. Tonight, we are asking you for approval to allocate additional funds that are federal dollars that can be used for intervention purposes to be used during the second semester. And that is part of the reason for calling this meeting tonight is we have a high sense of urgency to provide some additional resources to our schools to help them out with COVID learning loss. You've probably read across the nation, there have been research reports presented about the impact of the pandemic on learning. And as a reminder, we had all of our students almost missed a full semester last year when the pandemic hit. I want to say, and it's a great reminder yesterday as we drove around to 10 schools, our teachers and our support staff and our principals are doing an excellent job. I'm so proud of their hard work. We're reminded of that every single day. But the bottom line is we have to have a sense of urgency because we do have some students that are struggling, which we recognize and acknowledge. We want to say that we're here to meet their needs and have a game plan for moving forward. Union County Public Schools has led the state traditionally in all things academic. We plan to continue to do that. And when we have data and have challenges, we're going to meet those head on with a plan to execute and continue our level of high performance. So Dr. Bowers, if you want to go to presentation mode, we have a very brief presentation for you this evening, starting off with an overview. This is kind of going to give you the high level. You can go to the next slide, please. This is going to give you the high level indicators and kind of a mid-year update for grades 3 through 12, a mid-year update by plan for grades 3-12 for those students on Plan B or A versus Plan D or all virtual, a K2 update, and then what we're proposing to do next. I also want to say that one of the universal data points that we're going to refer to tonight are grades. Grades have been one common data element across grades 3 through 12 that we are able to capture in a universal sense as one data point and one metric to look at. And that's going to be the report that you see this evening. Yes, schools use other indicators and measurements around different data points, but for us at the district level, one of those data points is going to be grades. So Dr. Bowers, if you'd like to walk us through the next few slides on what the data is showing us based on the first semester, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Houlihan. I appreciate that, and good evening, members of the Board of Education. As Dr. Houlihan kind of referenced in his opening remarks there, this is really more of a snapshot of where we are, kind of at a mid-year update from kind of this academic learning loss that's taken place. As we know, the pandemic has had a tremendous impact on our schools, our teachers, our parents, our communities. So this gives us a chance to kind of see exactly kind of what the impact is telling us and kind of what some of these trends that certainly might be emerging are. First table I'm sharing with you right now gives you just what Dr. Houlihan referenced. It's kind of a bit of a snapshot of some of these grades that we're using as kind of academic progress measures from last year to this year. You think back to for into first semester last year, it was somewhat pre-pandemic. And then here we are now, we have this kind of been in this environment for more than approaching a year. And we have first semester data for the first time we're able to kind of capture and collect and make a comparison. So if you take a look at this table, kind of sets this up basically on a grade span comparison. You have your high school, your middle schools, and your elementary schools. And then you're going to see district level representation at the bottom. Just a bit of a disclaimer, you're going to see grades 3 through 12 represented when we talk about grades and academic progress here, because those are the grade spans in which we actually assign what would be grades for students. And when we get to K2, we're going to have to look at some different metrics that we would use. But here you see kind of a 2019-2020 first semester comparison, and then a 2020-2021 first semester comparison laid out for you. And you'll note kind of the difference between the two. So if you look at what would have been the number of students that would have been failing one or more courses from first semester last year to what would be first semester this year, you can see the impact that the pandemic has had, and certainly the loss of learning that we are experiencing really across all levels of schools. Next slide we have here for you kind of takes a little bit of a deeper dive, because one of the things we wanted to learn more about as well is kind of what does this look like for students who might be assigned to what would be in-person instruction. And we commonly know those as plans A or B right now. You know, as we know, our elementary students are plan A and our secondary students are plan B. And then how does that look? And when we kind of stack it alongside what would be those students who have elected for kind of a virtual learning environment. So again, by grade span, kind of follows that same reporting method here. When you look at in-person instruction and compare that to those that are certainly being served in a virtual environment, what we notice here is that children in both environments have been impacted as a result of this learning loss. It's not necessarily confined to just one or other. So this kind of tells us that we kind of have a impact across all students at all levels that are basically being served both virtually and in person. So again, these tables kind of give you kind of a sense of the backdrop there, and certainly where the impact's being felt. And again, this represents number of students that are failing one or more courses, just so you know that that is a constant throughout. Now, I mentioned earlier K2, and one of the things we don't have K2 is grades. So to really kind of get a better sense on what might be happening with our students or who are our youngest learners, we had to look at a different measurement. Students in grades K through 3, but we're using K2 here, participate really each year in what is called iStation formative assessments. And some of you may have heard about iStation and kind of how it's used, but it's the diagnostic reading tool that we administer to our youngest learners to kind of measure their reading growth throughout the year. So from a diagnostic measurement, we have 3 time periods at which these assessments are administered to the youngest learners. We have the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and then the end of the year. So in an effort to try to get a sense on what learning loss and what impact the pandemic has had on students in grades K2 now, because we're focusing on that, we used iStation data. And when a student participates in an iStation assessment, he or she, by virtue of their participation at the end of it, is kind of just given a level indicator or assigned a level score. Level 1 kind of being that, you know, I guess I would say lowest level of not necessarily performance, but kind of where they are in terms of the content that is certainly being assessed. And then level 5 being at the upper end. And those levels give you a sense of how likely it is that a student is progressing towards grade level mastery of standards at the end of the year. So our level 1-2 students are going to be those that are at-risk learners, and our level 4-5 students on iStation assessments will be those that are more likely to be on grade level by the end of the year. So when we go back again, pre-pandemic, which would have been middle of the year last year, to what is now current data, which is middle of the year this year, this table breaks it down by grade level, kindergarten, first and second grade. And you can see last year's middle of the year performance data as compared to this year's middle of the year performance data. And once again, kind of following the previous tables you saw, follows this same trend once again. What we're seeing again, pandemic has had a profound impact on our students and certainly their loss of learning. And you know, it doesn't mean kids are trying any less or certainly not working as hard as they were. It's just the fact that some of the limitations that have been in place and some of the things at which they've endured are now starting to kind of manifest themselves, and we're starting to see it a little bit more. Hence the sense of urgency Dr. Houlihan talked about. So that's kind of the data that we've got at this point to share. That's kind of a mid-year update to give us some indicators of, well, you know, it's moving forward, and possible action steps now are needed to be able to kind of reduce what would be some of the long-term implications. So I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Breedlove, and he's going to talk a little bit about the action steps and next steps moving forward.
Thanks, Dr. Bowers. And, you know, at this point, our last slide tonight is in reference to the overall request that we have from the Board of Education. We have shared several mid-year key performance indicators that Dr. Bowers just went over, and now we are asking for approval to use part of our CARES Act federal funding to be divided among our schools to assist them as they address the loss of learning for many of our students. If you look at the last bullet on this slide, you can see that there are several specific guidelines on how we can use the federal funds within our schools. You'll see that paying teachers and teachers' assistants to tutor outside the school day, and that would be nights and weekends. You also see that funding can be used to hire tutors to work in our schools. We've done this for a number of years now in several of our schools. And you may already know that we've posted for those positions on our school system's website where people can apply. And then lastly, the purchasing of additional instructional resources, such as digital programs, such as site licenses that we might use. An example of that would be, for example, at our high schools that are doing credit recovery. We currently use Apex, and we purchase license specific for the number of students that take those credit recovery courses. And so having students who do not pass a class and knowing the numbers that we have, we will have to add additional site licenses to our schools to support that credit recovery. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to back to Dr. Houlihan and to the board for questions and answers that we might provide.
I have a question. Are these the only thing that the school can use this money for? They can only do tutoring or purchasing instructional resources? Is there anything else they can use it for?
Yeah, it's very limited on what schools can do with this money. And so what we've done is we've outlined here what they can do.
Okay.
You know, when we had principals go through and list, you know, all of the things that they can think of to help support the loss of learning, of course, you get things that are outside these guidelines. So, you know, we are working with them on their current budgets that they have and being able to use other funds that they might have access to outside of CARES Act. But for the CARES Act funding, these are the specific areas that our CFO has identified with the use of by the federal government that we can use this money for.
Okay, I have two more questions that are somewhat related. Tutoring, you say that our teachers, our TAs, can tutor outside of the instructional day, and we can also hire additional tutors. I've seen somewhere that we're going to be paying $25 an hour for tutors. Does that go across the math, English, everything? And does that include the teachers, or is that just outside people, or what is going on with that?
I'll defer to Ms. McLam on that question. Thank you.
Yes, when we developed the math instructional tutoring program for our focus schools, we implemented some assessments and different criteria for those individuals, which we are currently going through the post that Dr. Breedlove mentioned. We are currently running those assessments and determining who would qualify under that math tutoring. Otherwise, we do have
but our
non-certified and certified. We have non-certified and certified tutor rates, but a teacher would make their hourly rate when tutoring. So that has been our customary practice. If we make some other determinations or have some other need, but right now the math tutors are making the 25.
Okay, so if a teacher is doing math tutoring, I assume that they make the criteria that you need for a math tutor. The teacher makes their hourly rate. So I hate to ask this question, but is that different than the 25 hours or $25 an hour that other people would be making?
It shouldn't be. Most beginning teachers, that $25 rate should be able to address any hourly rates for the teachers we have currently.
What about
The average beginning teacher, I believe, I have to look specifically, it should be close to that $25 an hour. So we did that, and
Okay, what about English tutors? Because there's 4 classes on here, correct? Or areas: math in the high school, math, English, science, and social studies. Are all the tutors going to be paid the same amount of money?
we currently have funding that pays tutors across the district with federal dollars. And so when we implement this, we have to be consistent with the tutoring rates that we already have in place. We have a certified and a non-certified rate, and then we have the math tutors that we've been using currently. So that distinction of being the math and using the math curriculum is what has designated the $25 an hour.
Okay, but so it will be across any subject?
The tutoring can be across any subject, not just math.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking about how we're paying
The
people.
rate of $25 an hour is intended for the math tutors. Because we have tutoring in general across the district already, changing there is a certified and non-certified rate. Every tutor in the district is not making $25 an hour currently. So if we were to change that rate, it would greatly impact our Title I schools and other schools that are currently doing tutoring outside of the focus school math tutoring.
Okay, so the other subjects won't be paid what the math tutors are being paid, correct? Yes.
No, only the math tutors will be paid for the $25 an hour.
Okay.
The way it's currently structured, if we change that for next year, we'll have to do that.
And is there set amounts that the other tutors will be making that we have in the district?
Say that again?
Do we have set amounts that each of the other subjects will be paid, the tutor?
Yes, a non-certified tutor makes $15 an hour currently, and a certified tutor makes $20.
Okay, thank you. One more question. I saw before that we were using Huntington in the public library to help us get tutors. How are the schools supposed to go about finding tutors? Are they going to go to central office in Huntington and the library resources will be able? How are they supposed to get these tutors?
So Huntington and the library system is more of a partnership offering that we're still working through. They're
Okay.
doing their own recruitment of their tutors, and once they're in place, we can make them available. But that's still a work in progress. For any other tutor, and we have over, I want to say already 150 plus applicants. They would go through our HR process. They would be put in the tutoring pool of applicants to be hired, and principals would work with HR on identifying who would be assigned to their campus if
Okay.
that's what they want to do.
Okay, but they can get their own tutors if they want?
Yes.
And can they use students?
I don't know about students for pay. We are working on
Not
peer
for pay.
tutoring.
Not for pay. Can they
Yeah.
use programs like Piedmont's doing and Porter Ridge is
Absolutely.
doing? Okay.
Absolutely. And we're encouraging all of our secondary schools to work on peer tutoring initiatives, as well as peer tutoring from high school to elementary in a virtual environment, specifically for reading.
Awesome. Okay, that was all my questions, sorry.
I have a question and an observation.
I think there's two parts to a student failing a class. Either he doesn't understand the material or he's just not doing the work. I found it's a little bit of both in our situation. So what I found the challenge is the teacher having either the time or it being stressed that in the 2 days they have together with the student live, if they could go over the classwork they've missed, or is there a possibility for work that they've done but they've just failed it, to give them an opportunity to redo the assignment? That's my question and my observation.
Dr. Breedlove, you can comment on that, but I think we always encourage our teachers to work directly with students on makeup work, on completing work. We've just passed a grading policy or administrative guidelines that gives more grace with regards to that subject, and a kind of the makeup window for students to turn in their work within a 4-day window. So we are doing all that we can, I think, with that in. We will continue to work with principals and teachers on when students are in person, face-to-face. We need to work with them individually on completing their assignments and mastering the content. I think it's a little bit of both, or a lot of both.
That's what I'm saying, but I am finding in our case, it is inconsistently implemented as far as the teachers either having time or that's built into the lesson plan for them to actually spend time to the student to go over and bring to their attention material they've missed.
And that is most certainly something we'll continue to work on, Mr. Sides. Absolutely.
I have a question. You had said for teachers, if they were wanting to tutor, it would be at night and on weekends. So I'm assuming that's through Google Meets or Zoom or something like that.
So it would be, yes, after school tutoring and on weekends. Now, we have some schools, particularly in a couple of elementary schools, that would like to offer in-person Saturday school, for lack of a better word, where they can bring students in if they have the funding for transportation and those kinds of things to do Saturday enrichment and intervention. That was a common practice that I used when I was an elementary principal. We may have middle and high schools that would like to do that as well. But for teachers, mostly what we're talking about would be after school tutoring, either face-to-face or virtual or both, and then Saturday tutoring sessions in either face-to-face or virtual or both, depending on the child.
And it would be one-on-one tutoring.
It would either be one-on-one or small group, like 2 or 3 students for one teacher, depending on the content and the situation.
Okay.
Can they use that money for transportation?
They cannot. They would have to use other school funds that they have in place in their budget for transportation.
Mr. Sides just asked a really good question. I don't mean to speak for Mr. Sides, but it's a really good question. So I'm going to ask this for him, and Gary, jump in. Has Dr. Breedlove, Dr. Bowers, Dr. Houlihan, have you reached out to Wingate University to see if they have any education students or whatever that might need credit for their internship or hours towards their certification to tutor, in any type of partnership with Wingate University to tutor in our schools?
I can answer that. We are working with Wingate on multiple fronts there, as well as other universities as well. Obviously, we have a deep need of tutors, and that is a group of individuals that you read these articles all across the nation. Universities are getting more and more involved in locally Wingate. I know I've spoken to directly with students at Duke University who are interested in supporting Union County Public School students. We had a student that graduated from Weddington High School that is putting a group together there, and to be able to go in and start off working at a couple of our high schools particularly, and looking to expand to multiple universities and friends that they have putting that together. So that is a front that has not been really tapped into, that we are starting up, especially when it comes to supporting. They already go and support at Wingate Elementary, for example. We have that going on currently, but outside of that, looking to expand across Union County Public Schools as a whole.
So I need some clarification. Can we go back to the presentation? And I am looking at the slide that shows on the left-hand column grades 9 through 12, 6 through 8, 3 through 5, and then the cumulative 3 through 12. And the second column, it shows Plan B students, then Plan D students, then total students. Yes. Okay. So I just need some clarification whether I'm looking at this right or not. So if I'm looking at the students on Plan B, grades 9 through 12, 19% are failing courses, whereas the 9 through 12 Plan D virtual students is 27% failure. And then drop down grades 6 through 8, if you're on Plan B, it's about a 29% failure. But if you're in grades 6 through 8 virtual, it's a 35% failure. And then the elementaries, interesting enough, are about even. It's about 12.5% failure, no matter if you're in person or virtual. But, you know, our elementary students are also getting 4 days a week. But anyway, so those numbers are interesting, but is it fair to look at it that way? Because it basically what I'm seeing, if you're on Plan D, the likelihood of your failure is much higher than if you're in person.
I'll try to answer that first, Ms. Merrill, and then Dr. Bowers, if I'm incorrect, let me know. I think what you have to look at in that scenario are the number of students in each category. Remember,
And
we have about 80% of our students that are opting for in-person learning and 20% opting for full virtual. So when you think about the numbers, you see where I'm going?
I
guess
do. Yep.
It's kind of like a sample size question. You're going to have a higher rate on your virtual because you have less kids in that model, I guess. Am I saying that right, Dr. Bowers?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And I think Ms. Merrill's point is valid as well. And the point of this one is really to kind of illustrate that regardless of whichever plan one is being served by, that what we're seeing is, you know, kind of this change from where we were last year to this year. You know, it's just because we certainly won't want anyone to think that because they're on virtual that, well, those children are performing better, or those children are more geared for it, and things like that. You know, it's just, this is an impact that's being felt across all arenas. And to Dr. Houlihan's point, it's, you know, because of the lower volume, we would normally expect to see a higher percentage of those that would be struggling. But as you astutely pointed out, you know, our elementaries don't quite see that same impact. Mm-hmm. But also we had a good number of elementary students when we went back to in-person instruction back in the fall come off of some of our virtual offerings back into school for in-person learning. And I think you hit a valid point. 4 days versus what's happening at secondary could also be a contributing factor. I don't want to make
Well, and in elementary, you have one teacher. But when you're a middle school student and a high school student, you're having to juggle, you know, 4 to 7 teachers and classes.
Yes, ma'am.
But, you know, I still I am still seeing that Plan D, if you're in middle school, all virtual, I mean, 35% is 35%.
You're correct, exactly.
And,
Yes, ma'am.
and unfortunately, the state is not allowing our school board to allow middle school and high school students more days in person because we're restricted to Plan B. And this data, in my mind, clearly illustrates that your failure rate is going to be higher if you're virtual. And if we could give these students more than 2 days per week, if the state would allow local school boards to gradually move from Plan B to Plan A and start offering our middle school and high school students more days in person, then we're showing in person the failure rate is lower. And I think it's a shame that the state is not allowing local school districts the option of giving our middle school and our high school, and I think about our juniors and seniors that are preparing to graduate from Union County Public Schools, hopefully graduate from Union County Public Schools. But they're not getting the in-person foundation that they need for college or career readiness. And they're on the cusp of graduating. So, we really need to advocate for our local school boards to show this data and show that virtual, while, it might be a good emergency backup, but there's no replacement for in-person learning. And our elementary numbers are so much better. Our middle school numbers are really bad, and high school numbers are not well. And this report is why we need our kids back in the classroom more than 2 days a week. And that if any other board members want to make comments or ask questions.
And I'm going to take a step further. We've got basically 4 months left in this school year. After May, it's over, and you got spring break in there. So even if we go back 4 days a week for middle and high school, say March 1st, are these failing kids going to be able to catch up? I don't know. What if it's after spring break? Is that going to be enough time to catch up? I don't know. The other question I have, is there any funding currently or contemplated? And if not, I think we should advocate for funding. We're going to need summer remediation for these kids that are failing, or we're going to be holding who knows how many kids back. I mean, that's the last resort, right? And we don't usually have we have funding for reading camps during the summer, but we don't have funding for full-blown summer school for math or English or what have you on different grade levels, correct?
That's a good question, Gary. Can this money be used for summer camps and stuff by the principals instead of, in addition to tutoring?
So the short answer is yes. There is no expiration date on these funds anytime in the very near future. I believe the funds expire in 2022. So they can roll any unspent dollars into summer enrichment, summer intervention. I will say this, we have not gotten any word from the state on funding for summer reading camps or summer schooling, although there have been a lot of discussions and proposed discussions in the General Assembly about additional dollars for summer reading and math intervention. I think regardless of whether we get funding from the states, if we have available funds from CARES Act or other sources that we can use, we've got to continue learning through the summer months. I think Dr. Breedlove's team is working on a multi-week plan right now during the summer months to figure out how to get your most at-risk below grade level children in, and that's at all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high. So we are working on that regardless of whether or not the state gives us the dollars, so that in the event we can use other funding sources to do that.
Yeah.
Well, we have
And-
a member of the Union County delegation who's on education appropriations. I think we need to be reaching out and bring this to their attention.
They've already brought it to our attention that they're looking at summer camp and in summer enrichment. They're going to try to put it into a bill. I agree with, I assume that most of our board or all of our board agrees with Mrs. Merrill that we need to get the 6 through 12 kids back in school more than 2 days a week.
Yeah, as I viewed the data, all I kept thinking about was what Madam Chair just expressed, and I kept thinking to myself, why are we doing this? And understanding, what we said, but words like pandemic, this and that, at some point, we have another pandemic, and the pandemic of lack of educating our children. And so, as she has already so eloquently, stated, I just want to second her words, stirred her words with the loudest voice possible, that if we ever wanted a tool that, y'all know that the Rev loves sports. If we ever wanted to see which team was better, this layout unequivocally shows which team is better. How much longer are we going to have these kids to suffer? The voices crying, don't open the schools. We now know from the surveys that y'all got, they are not the majority. The majority is the parents that want their children in school. The data says it. The CDC says it, regardless of what the spokeswoman said. The CDC director said it. We need to get these kids back. And we have a tool now that we can take to our legislative delegation, whomever else we need to take it to say, here's the stats. The virtual team is losing, and they're losing badly. The in-person team is winning. Hold and serve. It has to stop. So we got to get these kids back in school. When you look at these percentages, I mean, they're just scattered. How bad do it has to get? So, Madam Chair, you nailed it. That was going to be my biggest thing. As I looked at these numbers, I just kept getting, it's hard to get me sad, but I was getting sadder and sadder and saying, why are we doing this to these kids? We need to stop.
Let me just, in support of all of our incredible teachers that were selected or chosen to teach on Plan D, our Plan D teachers were given a very, very difficult assignment. So I want to be clear that our words of disappointment in this report isn't by no means a reflection of our teachers that were asked to offer families and students a virtual choice. But what I believe it really, really says is that there is absolutely no replacement for being in a classroom with a licensed teacher who loves and motivates and encourages our students. So while the Plan D report doesn't look good, we appreciate our Plan D teachers, but at the end of the day, what it means is that we need our amazing teachers back in the classroom with their students.
What it says, Madam Chair, is that, again, the sports analogy is that we've asked them to coach, and let's say it's football, we ain't even gave them no helmets. They got small shoulder pads, no knee pads, no hip pads. And then we say, get out there and play that team that has all the most modern equipment. So in no way, shape, or form are we talking about the teachers. We're talking about what they're up against trying to teach. The teacher can't make little Johnny turn on his screen. The teacher can't make little Johnny ask questions. And so no matter how good they're doing, they're not equipped to be challenged with what they're up against. So teachers that you're listening, and I know why Madam Chair said what she said, we're not, this isn't about you. This is about what you've been given by so many people, and it has to end. It has to stop.
So does anyone have any questions so that we can get this conversation back towards a motion or a conversation that leads to a motion that would approve the loss of learning funds from the federal CARES Act money that has been sent to our district that
I will make a
would go
motion.
towards remediation?
I will make a motion to spend the CARES Act funding for loss of learning the way it is on the document in the board docs.
Well, I have a, well.
And my understanding is that the allotments are based upon 30% is ADM and the rest is based on the outcomes of the fall semester.
Yes, ma'am. The data and percentages of free reduced lunch as well. That is all correct.
Okay.
And if I could have a second, we could begin discussion.
This is Joe. I second it.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so board members, ask all the questions or comments you have about the dollar figures that would be given to each school to address their learning loss.
I want a clarification. Now, are we going to hold some of this money back in case there's no other funding source for some kind of summer remediation? Or are there other pots that we can draw from? I want a clarification. I don't want to wipe this out on just tutoring and then we find out at the end of the year because of budget issues on the state level or whatever reason, we don't have any funds if we have to pay on our own dime for summer remediation.
We're getting more COVID relief money, right?
It's two parts. Ms. Heintel is right. We are in the midst of getting additional dollars, I believe both state and federal, of relief packages that will be coming our way to specifically address learning loss. On this portion of the money, this is kind of wave one of additional dollars that have been targeted towards intervention supports and learning loss. Ms. McLam, you can comment, but it's a total of $400,000. That is not exhausting all of our CARES Act funds. There are millions of dollars left for multiple purposes, including intervention and tutoring. And Ms. McLam, you can comment on that if you'd like.
Houlihan's correct. This account was provided for this specific purpose. And so it was the first round of us being able to allocate dollars for the schools to address these needs. And we do have some additional funding that we anticipate coming. There's multiple bills from the federal and state level that we foresee coming down. So as well as other CARES Act funds that we could use if we needed to address these needs.
I understand what Mr. Sides is saying. I get what you're saying, Gary, but I think we need to try to use this money between now and the end of the school year to try to help our students where they're at right now, instead of holding the money until the summer when we think we have funds that we could use it over the summer. I think we need to do as much as we possibly can now so that the second semester can look different than the first semester.
I agree. I would also like to have staff look at projections of what kind of funds it will take at our current failure rates to fund adequate summer remediation. So we have an idea what this could cost us based on the current trend, which we hope will improve. So when this funding does come down the pipe, we can kind of match things up. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Dr. Breedlove and Ms. McLam will take lead on that. No problem.
Okay.
So one way we could look at this, Gary and all board members, is that the report we have made public and speaking to tonight, keep in mind, this is just the fall semester failure report. So if we go ahead and allocate this tutoring to schools now based on their fall needs, when additional funds come in from the state or federal level, we can allocate that towards, what happens in the spring semester. But I think we need to act now based off these fall numbers. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. If there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor say aye by raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and all those opposed? Hearing none, this motion passes 7-0. And I just want to thank our staff, Dr. Breedlove, Dr. Bowers. We know the level of dig you had to do into all of our schools and all the data, to put this, very, very good report together. And I just really appreciate the way you married the data from all 53 schools with the CARES Act funding so that it was adequately distributed to the schools that needed it the most. I want to thank you for that. Okay, so if there are no other questions or comments, that I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Good night.